Hi, my name's Jessica Brummel, and I'll be walking you through just a few approaches to teaching music. Music class and my lesson plans can seem pretty subjective courses to school administration, so I'm here to talk about some music education researchers that have made our field more objectively educational for our students. They've studied how humans best learn music and the musical aptitude everyone is born with, and I'm excited to share this with you today. Our first researcher and approach is the Kodai approach. Created by Zoltan Kodály, and it originated in Hungary in the 1940s. So Kodály thought that music should be at the heart of the curriculum, a core subject and a basis for education. Musical literacy creates a well-rounded person emotionally, intellectually, physically, and aesthetically. The goal is to treat music as central to all curriculum and is an essential second language to every student. Some of the elements of the Kodály approach are that it starts with the youngest of children and includes their main language. The child's heritage and or folk songs are the most important use in this method, and solfege and hand signs are used in this method to train the musical ear and eventually lead to more musical notation as they progress. Rhythm duration syllables are used, like ta or titi or tika tika, also for furthering notation, and sequences and instruction are crucial. So the teaching process, there are three main parts: prepare, present, and practice. Prepare is teaching every element of a musical concept without actually naming it. So the students discover and aren't actually told the concept. The oral, physical, and or visual discovery really helps them understand the concept. Present is naming the element and students knowing the concept fully. Being able to identify the concept out of context is also crucial for them. And then finally, practicing, using the concept in a deliberate and intelligent way, creating with the element or the concept. These child developmental characteristics in music, rather than the logic of the subject matter, determine the sequence. So quarter notes before eighth, duple meter before triple, certain intervals before others, sound before sight. It's just basically making a strong foundation for them to grow off of. Our next music education researcher is Edwin Gordon, and he created the music learning theory that originated in America in the 1980s. Some of his goals for the music learning theory is that children learn best through audiation and rote learning long before notation or writing music, which is the natural progression of learning a spoken language. So the thing that I love about Gordon is that music is another language and should be taught like that. Like you're taught Spanish in school, you should also be taught music. So music is a language of its own, so the goal of the theory is to teach children listening and performing skills before seeing and writing. So students need to think in the musical language before reading and writing, and musical aptitude is something that a child is born with but can certainly be shaped by a good or poor musical education from birth until 9 years old. So it's very crucial that the children have a good musical education young. Some of the elements, while it does not specifically address cultural context of music, it's crucial for the teacher to introduce a wide variety of music examples and cultural background learning as an extension of the music learning theory. The music learning theory should be all music, not just Western music. Children must be singing and chanting tonal and rhythm patterns on a regular basis, and teachers must give ample musical varieties of keys and meters before asking them to sing, then read, and then later write. The teaching process of the music learning theory is pretty open-ended and can be adapted for any teacher. So it's whole, part, whole. The whole of the song or the whole of the lesson is introduced first, and then the teacher asks questions that lead to inference learning so that the students are active and involved in their own learning process. The teacher sings the song again, inviting the rhythm of the macro beat to be padded or played, and then they teach the different parts of the song, and then finally the students are able to perform the song themselves. Our next researcher is Carl Orff. His approach originated in Germany in the 1920s, and I think he lays the best foundation for future instrumentalists because he incorporates elementary instruments as one of the main avenues of his teaching. Some of his goals are active and creative music making that can be adapted and adopted across the world and could be the best avenue for setting a foundation of more complex musical concepts. The goal of this method is to teach children through the approach that is most comfortable and familiar to them: play, speech, and movement. Some of his elements are singing, saying, dancing, and playing that are close to the child's world of thought and fantasy. He uses barred instruments like xylophone and marimba, the soprano recorder, and unpitched percussion. This instrumentarium offers every child an opportunity to participate as a member of the ensemble. There's no explaining. Usually in an ORF lesson, children learn by doing, playing, and creating rather than formal instruction. Improvisation and creating music themselves is emphasized, and each concept, rhythm, melody, harmony, and percussion, starts at its most basic and foundational element that is close to the child's world. In ORF lessons, you imitate first. You follow the teacher and imitate sounds, rhythms, and body movements. You explore next. You perform without the teacher's help. You add the song plus the body percussion or different elements simultaneously. Then you improvise. The teacher makes something up with no practice and then has the students do the same. Not noise, but music. We create new patterns and components. And finally, they create themselves. They combine material from previous phases into rondos, variations, and theater pieces. The Dalcroze approach is my favorite because I think kinesthetic learning is extremely important at an early age. Some of his goals are heightened body awareness and association of rhythm with a physical experience that helps reinforce concepts kinesthetically. We finally have a learning experience to better understand and learn music through movement. This method capitalizes on the natural and instinctive gestures that are associated with making music and fully understanding rhythms and pitches. This way of learning through movement trains the body to be an instrument and helps the individual perceive music fully. The body is the original musical instrument. Eurythmics doesn't give an audience a show, but rather helps the mover better understand the musical concepts. Some of the elements of this approach are they're moving in some way. The students are moving in some way, either walking around the room, making gestures with their hands, or other parts of the body that is responsive to the music that they hear. So eurythmics is using movement to better understand rhythm, structure, and musical expression. Dalcroze also used solfege hand signs to develop an understanding of pitch, scale, and tonality, and he uses observation to understand the form and meaning through spontaneous musical creation using movement, voice, and instruments. This method heightens concentration and focus, improves coordination, and assists in hearing and listening, and sharpens the musical senses. Teaching a Dalcroze lesson, there isn't a specific teaching process for this method, just different ways to incorporate movement into lessons. For example, students may be asked to move in a specific way as directed by the teacher, in a way that they deem correlated to the music, to respond when a signal or command is given, in a canon or an echo movement, by stepping to the beat, using props, or any other movement activity by themselves or with a partner or group. While I love music for music's sake, I think music is also important to foster community, communication, and expression, and I think world music pedagogy does a good job at this. It's the largest method we have and encompasses the other methods we've discussed and more, based on the diversification and globalization of today's students. It's the embrace of music, education, and culture. Some of the goals is using the study of ethnomusicology that meets music education, so educating students by immersing them in the world's musical cultures. It provides students with an understanding of music as a culturally differentiated human expression. Music is not only sound, but also behavior in accordance with culture. We ask the questions of what meaning does this music hold within the culture, and how can the music best fit into situations of musical education? World music pedagogy is making sense of music as an oral art, a channel of creative practice, and a means of personal and community human expression. Some of the elements are learning by listening, having students actively engage with their listening, finding similarities and differences from the child's everyday life, using multiple notation systems or none, using a notation system used in songs or pieces of world music, or learning songs or pieces by rote. And I'd like to add a disclaimer. The background for this page is not a good example of world music because it uses only Western notation, but you wouldn't believe how hard it is to find an all-encompassing world music picture. So I'll be better at teaching world music than I am at finding a picture. Another element is oral and aural techniques, having students listen and actively participate in world music and becoming immersed in the culture and the music of the culture. It highlights improvisatory methods in each style and engaging cultural barriers, finding similarities and differences of cultures in music, and teaching children to embrace differences and not to be afraid to learn or use them, finding value and respect in these differences, and broadening their cultural experiences and knowledge. Students not only sing and play music from around the world, but they're taught that the culture it comes from is important and to be immersed in it. Teachers care about the comprehensive nature of music in ways that encompass race, gender, and ethnicity. Teaching a world music lesson involves 5 phases for teaching music. Attentive listening, so children need to hear the different timbres and the instruments used. Engaged listening, so actively participating in the music while the recording of the music is going. Inactive listening, so an earnest effort to participate fully in recreating the music without the recording. Creating this music, improvisations, and in compositions. And integrating world music, which is the most important, in its connection from the music to their everyday lives. While there isn't a clear process for each lesson, the teacher must research and study the culture of the song and bring in as many elements as they can to the classroom. Cultural relevance is taught alongside the songs, rhythm, and melodies, and there is a larger purpose for this music beyond what music notation can tell us. These approaches to music education have a lot in common. All methods emphasize the importance of creating young musicians. Gordon, in the music learning theory, the music aptitude is created from birth until age 9, so it is crucial for young students to engage with music. In world music pedagogy, it uses music to teach the culture to the younger generations of that culture. Music is a second language and something that every person can relate to around the world, and all of these approaches agree with this. As far as the elements go, rote learning is how students first learn to participate in music, so it's a main element in all of the approaches. Music and movement is integrated in all of the approaches, but in different ways, and I'll discuss it more later. Lessons of all the approaches have some sort of listening component at the beginning, whether listening to the teacher sing or play an instrument, or listening to a recording. Students then imitate what they hear in order to participate in the music learning themselves. Every approach has some level of creativity and improvisation that can help the students express themselves through the art of music. I'll unpack these ways of creativity later as we contrast the different approaches. There are many differences among these approaches, and I'd like to highlight some of these now. As far as the goals and elements go, there are differences in the end goal. What do we want our young musicians to be able to do in the future? With Kodai, there's an emphasis on notational language, so learning Western music notation, and use of home heritage folk songs. For Orff, it's the use of elementary instruments, and emphasis on play and things close to the child's world of fantasy. With Gordon, we want to teach our students to emphasize the sequence of singing, playing, reading, and then writing. With Dalcroze, we want them to feel the rhythm and the steady beat, the emphasis on eurythmics, and having a tangible musicality that can morph into an internalization of this musicality. For world music pedagogy, There's an emphasis on engaging cultural barriers and embracing differences in music, seeing music as a way to express yourself and build community. I think each of these end goals are equally valid and they will be achieved in my classroom. For creativity, Orff and Dalcroze add improvisation extremely early, and it's a pillar of their approach. Improvisation is exploring the elements that are taught. For Kodai and Gordon, however, after a foundation is set with an element, at the very end they can explore improvisation. It's seen as a higher order of thinking that can only be taught after a firm foundation of an element. For the use of movement, Kodai and Orff, it's a means to an end. Movement is used when it leads to a connection in notation or playing instruments or other body percussion. For Gordon and the world music pedagogy, it's not specifically stated, but the use of movement is a background means to an end, if necessary. The movement to imitate in a cultural song or to learn the words of a song. For Dalcroze, the use of movement is not just a means, it's the end. Movement of the body is music, and it is the art form and the instrument. As far as instrumental use goes, Orff has designated instruments to learn and use. Dalcroze uses the body as an instrument, and the instruments are added to enhance the learning, but not the main source of the learning. Music reading, I believe Kodai does the best job at this. It teaches you how to read Western music notation. This approach sets up the transition from rote learning to notation in the most all-encompassing way, not much of an emphasis on writing, though. In Orff, music writing is emphasized through playing instruments by improvisation, but music reading isn't emphasized as much. With Gordon, the last pillars of music reading are reading and writing music, but aren't introduced before listening and singing and performing. In world music pedagogy, music reading and the use of music notation from different cultures is important, and writing music comes after the immersion of the culture. As far as the teaching processes and music used in the lessons, Kodai and Orff use folk music from the home country to build a community with the home country, and Gordon and the world music pedagogy stress the use of a wide variety of music from around the world for an all-encompassing musical education. My personal evaluation of these approaches and how I will teach in the classroom take elements from each approach. I think Kodai prepares students best to read and write music in Western notation, which is almost essential to further the child's education into middle school and high school music. In the same breath, Orff sets the best foundation for playing in musical ensembles and listening while playing. With Orff's approach, students' fine motor skills can be refined before they enter band or learn to play the piano or any other instrument. I think Gordon's music learning theory does the best job of scaffolding music learning similarly to how a student would learn a second language. And I love movement and music, so Dalcroze is honestly my favorite. I remember personally in my awesome elementary music class as a student learning through movement. I think it's why I excel at musicality and steady rhythms, and I'd love to translate these strengths to my students. And finally, world music pedagogy. Music is crucial to every culture in different ways, and immersing my classroom in these cultures could really make the world a community, more educated and sensitive to the world around us. I think that music is intrinsically important to the human spirit. I hope to emphasize its importance through using these approaches every day in my classroom.